Hello and welcome to this video, which is part of my A-level series for academic study tips. And today what we're going to be looking at is how to use critical concepts in your essay writing. Now, what I mean by critical concepts is ideas that literary critics have proposed about a particular text or about a particular theme. Literary critics are people who are experts in their field. They will have studied the text in the area of interest for a long time. They may be PhD students or lecturers at university or literary theorists, something like that. So, for example, you might think about the critic we're going to talk about today, S.T. Coleridge, who wrote a very interesting essay about Othello. And one of the differences between studying English literature for GCSE and for A-level is that you start to go on a journey towards engaging with these critics. At GCSE, your teacher will have studied the work of these critics and will have digested them and will have presented them to you in lessons, but you might not actually be aware that they've done that. So a way that they might have presented it is, for example, if you were doing Macbeth, the teacher might have said to you, is Lady Macbeth a villain or is she a victim of a patriarchal society? And what the teacher has done there is they've read different critical essays and they've distilled that into a question that you can access at GCSE level. Now at A-level, you need to start to do that reading and do that engagement and that questioning for yourself. And as you go on to university, obviously you take the next step in that journey as well. So in terms of using our critical concepts, first of all, why? Well, we do it because we want to confirm our ideas, perhaps, or because we want to extend our ideas. You know, we want to think more deeply about a particular topic, and reading an essay by someone else is going to help us to do that. Or we might want to challenge our ideas, and in challenging those ideas, you make them richer, you make them deeper, and you make them more robust as well. And my top tips for using critical concepts are to embed them fluently in your argument. You know, you don't want it to just look like something that's bolted on because your teacher's told you that you have to do it. You want it to really form part of the organic argument that you're creating. And you need to also engage with critical concepts critically. And by that I mean you need to use your knowledge of the text, your understanding of the text, its context, of lots of different arguments about it, and think, do I agree with this critical idea or do I disagree with it? And I'm going to model this for you today using the text of Othello and Coleridge's ideas about the character of Iago within that play. So the question that I've picked is here. So Shakespeare uses the character of Iago to explore the depth of mankind's immorality. To what extent do you agree? And I mean, there's obviously lots of things which will already be popping into your head that you could say about that, but we can enhance that and deepen that and extend our thinking and make it more nuanced if we take Coleridge into account. So the first thing that we need to do is to craft an introduction to this. So I'm going to start with a general statement. So throughout the Renaissance being 16th, 17th century, throughout the Renaissance play Othello, the tragic villain Iago is undoubtedly cast as the immoral, I already used the word villain so I don't want to repeat that, as the immoral character foil to Othello. Okay, and in terms of the language that I'm using here, I just want to point out to you that when I use words like undoubtedly, or definitely, or certainly, what I'm doing there is I'm asserting my opinion about the text. I'm not using tentative language, I'm not suggesting, I'm saying this is my argument, and this is what I think, and this is the fundamental idea that I'm basing my essay on. So, Othello, the tragic villain Iago, is undoubtedly cast as the immoral character foil to Othello. However, a range of literary critics have disagreed as to the reasons for Iago's actions. Okay, so what is undoubted here is that Iago is an immoral character. He is malevolent, he is evil. What is doubted, though, what we aren't sure about, and what this essay is going to look at, is the reasons behind Iago's malevolence. What prompts him to be this malevolent character? So in my introduction, I'm going to set up two possible different lines of argument that I'm going to trace throughout my essay. And then in my conclusion, I'm going to indicate which of those lines of argument I agree with more. So firstly, Coleridge's concept of Iago's motiveless, sorry, can't quite see that, of Iago's motiveless malignity. And by that, what Coleridge means is that Iago has no motivations for his evil. So motiveless, no motivations, malignant, like malevolent, malign. Any word that begins with mal means something that's evil or something bad. So Coleridge argues that Iago's motiveless malignity is what's interesting in the play, that there's no reason for what Iago does. So firstly, Coleridge's concept of Iago's motiveless malignity is suggested throughout the play by his aesthetic delight, in causing pain. However, a second line of argument could be that Iago's motivations are actually rooted in his misogyny and racism. A contextual argument that suggests Shakespeare uses Iago to criticise the Jacobean power structures. Okay, sorry for my handwriting, and sorry that I'm doing this a bit slowly, but hopefully this gives you an impression of what it's really like to write an essay. And so if we look at what I've written here, what I've got is some words which are doing a lot of work in my introduction. So undoubtedly shows what is cast in stone, what is definite in my argument. But what I've also done is use a lot of tentative language and a lot of modal verbs to suggest that there are different ways of interpreting that these critics are suggesting. So here, for example, is suggested. We've got however, the second line of argument could be, this suggests, I've used that again, and so on. So I'm using those words to set up these two lines of argument, which I'm going to look at in my essay, and then I'm going to decide in my conclusion which one I agree with. And as you can see here as well, I've fluently embedded Coleridge's concept of Iago's motiveless malignity in my introduction. And I've used that as a really nice kind of buzz phrase to build my essay on. So that's one way that you can use a critical concept as a foundation for your essay that you can look at and say, do I agree with this? Or as a concept that you might want to disagree with. So what I would do next is I'd write my first analytical paragraph. And I'm going to take this first line of argument here and follow it through and see what evidence I can find in the play that would support that. So I'm going to say here, at first glance, At first glance, Coleridge's summary of Iago's mode of list malignity is attractive. When we first meet Iago, he delights in commanding Rodrigo to plague Brabantio with flies. Okay, so what I've done here is I'm showing that I'm taking Coleridge's idea as a basis for this paragraph. Again, I've embedded it in this sentence, and then I'm looking at the text and thinking, right, what evidence from the play can I pick out that's going to support Coleridge's point of view? So obviously after that you'd have your analysis, but I think that's going to be for a separate video. You'd have your analysis and you'd maybe have a couple of paragraphs where you see how convincing Coleridge's ideas could possibly be. But then after that, it's not good enough to just kind of accept a critical idea and think, right, this is the answer, this is 100% what I need to be agreeing with, because there's always different ways of looking at things. So I'm going to have another paragraph, which I'm going to say you can use a more sophisticated language if you want, but on the other hand, many critics have questioned Coleridge's evaluation of Iago as being potentially reductive. Okay, so what I'm doing here is, as you've done all the way through since year 7, I'm using my connectives in order to signal the direction that my essay is going in, and then I'm referring to other critics. If you've done a lot of reading around the subject, you could be a bit more specific about which critics and exactly what they have said. And then I'm using tentative language to say it's potentially reductive. It's potentially too easy to say that Iago doesn't have any motivations. So let's put here, such critics have posited, what a nice word that is, have posited that in fact Iago is actually motivated by deep-seated racism, which was typical of Shakespeare's society. Okay, so I'm moving to consider a whole different line of argument here. And so what I'll need to do now is I'll need to get some evidence from the play. So I might look at perhaps Iago's racist statements in Act 1. I might also say then after that Iago was motivated not just by his racism, but by his misogyny within this patriarchal world. So I'd look at the statement that he makes when he says that Othello has done my office, he slept with my wife, and I'd look at those kind of ideas of possession of his wife which are motivating Iago. So I'd have my evidence and I'd have my analysis of that evidence. And then what I would need is a conclusion which indicates which of these lines of critical thinking I agree with more. And in your conclusion, instead of being tentative and suggesting things, you need to be quite definite. So those modal verbs are going to shift from it could be, it might be, it may be, to it is. It should be interpreted like this. So we're being very definite in our conclusion. I'm just going to look back at the question as well to make sure that I'm anchoring my conclusion in the question. Okay, so in conclusion, again, you could be more sophisticated than this if you've got a little bit more time. I'm trying to do this quite quickly. So in conclusion, it is clear that far from being motiveless, Iago's malignity, and I'm using Coleridge's words here to show that I'm still evaluating, I'm still considering his statement. Far from being motiveless, Iago's malignity is in fact a product of a historical moment in time, and Shakespeare is using Iago to criticize such racist and misogynistic ideologies. Okay, so again, you can be much more sophisticated when you're writing, but I've got my connective showing my line of argument, and here it is clear. It is a product. He's using Iago to criticize. I'm being very definite in the choice of verbs that I'm using. So to sum up then, why have I used Coleridge's concept of motiveless malignity? Well, I could have used it to confirm my own point of view, but actually it turns out that I disagreed with it. So I've used it to extend and to challenge my thought and to deepen my ideas and my understanding of the play. And so what have I done? Well, I've embedded it fluently in my essay. And if you pause the screen and have a look at the fact that I'm not just bolting it on, I'm not just adding it on as something nice to make myself look clever, but I'm weaving it into my sentence structure and into my argument. And I've engaged with it critically. I've started by saying, could this be true? Could this possibly work? Could this make sense? Possibly. And then thinking, right, what if actually I disagreed with this? What would I argue then? And then I've kind of evaluated those two lines of argument and made my own decision. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope this helps you with your essay writing.